Welcome to Tech This Out. I'm Walt Macaborski. Joining us today is U.S. Senator John Cornyn. Thank you for joining us.
Good to be with you, Walt.
You know, I've known you since the 90s. When you were a Texas Attorney General, you saw Austin and the tech scene when it was kind of just beginning. Our big players were Dell, Samsung, MCC, but we were still kind of considered the also-rans, and they gave us the moniker Silicon Hills because we weren't really Silicon Valley. We were just kind of finding our way. But I think now we're our own technopolis and so much bigger. How would you describe the evolution, and where are we now, do you think, in tech?
Well, of course, a lot of this started out in California, and we've seen a big exodus of people coming from California to Texas for a variety of reasons, mainly because of our economy being less regulated, and people basically their standard of living costs are a lot lower, and they've been able to pursue their dreams. And, of course, the city has been and the region has been very receptive, and as well as the state, to people moving here. So I think a lot of that is people moving here, but then we've seen things like the Army Futures Command move here, which is designed to be the interface between the military and the tech community for the benefit of the warfighter. So a lot of exciting developments.
You know, one warning flag that just shot across the tech world at that time was the dotcom bust. Did that put warning flags in your head about we need to be more diverse, we need to get more infrastructure, we need to invest more? And maybe was that maybe in the back of your mind as you were thinking about the CHIPS Act in terms of competing?
You know, mainly my concern was national security. When I began to think about COVID-19, for example, when I called Governor Abbott and I asked him, when COVID hit, I said, what do you need? He said, I need testing and I need PPE. And I said, great, what's PPE? He said, masks and gowns. I said, oh, okay, personal protective equipment. He said, it's all made in China. We can't get it here. So I began to think, like a lot of people, about supply chains, which we kind of take for granted, and then finally recognized that only about 12% of the advanced semiconductors, which basically operate everything that has an on and off switch, are made in Asia, and with Taiwan being the epicenter of the most advanced semiconductors. So that really started me thinking, what happens if there's another pandemic, a natural disaster, or heaven forbid, a military conflict in the South China Sea? So that was the impetus for it, and it only took us 2 years to get the bills passed.
Well, it's a big one, too, especially for us. You co-authored the CHIPS Act. We just saw it in action in Central Texas with Samsung getting $6.4 billion in direct funding. What will this mean for Samsung, Central Texas, and America?
Well, first of all, it means we have a secure supply of these advanced semiconductors that run everything from your cell phone to the fifth generation strike fighter, the F-35. And so that's really, really important. But in terms of its economic impact, as you saw, Samsung initially announced a $17 billion chips fab or manufacturing facility. Then they doubled down, and now it's $40 billion. That's big, and obviously going to employ a lot of hardworking Texans, but also going to put some strains on the workforce, which means that schools from our four-year universities to our community colleges, like here in Austin, are going to have to churn out the sort of trained workforce to be able to qualify for these good, well-paying jobs.
For sure, and you know, as we look at the ecosystem here, the startup scene is really flourishing. We have Apptronic doing robots for NASA. They just got a contract with Mercedes. You have Icon producing 3D printed homes here and working on the moon and Mars. And then Emerald Cloud Labs has a base here where they're doing cloud lab testing worldwide. How will the CHIPS Act help the startups?
Well, first of all, it gives them the basic components they need in order to do these miraculous things that they do, which I frankly don't really understand, but I know it's important. I think technology is getting smaller and cheaper and faster, and with conserving more and more electricity. As you know, all of this is creating a huge demand for electricity for all the data centers, all the artificial intelligence, everything that runs everything we depend on day in and day out. And so it's interesting how everything's connected to everything else when it comes to the basic energy supplies that produces the electricity, the transmission lines. It's all created an ecosystem, to use your terminology that is important that we be aware of and we understand the context.
How do you think we keep the momentum going? This is great to see. Shockwaves hit us the last couple of weeks. Tesla announced 2,600 layoffs, and then surprised everybody to see Oracle is moving its headquarters from Austin to Tennessee.
Yeah, that was a shocker.
Yeah,
I understand it has to do mainly with their healthcare business, but that's very unusual. That's sort of an anomaly. Everybody seems to want to move here and not move out of here somewhere else. But yeah, it's it's been exciting to watch. And the main thing I think government needs to do is get out of the way. You got a lot of very talented entrepreneurs, people willing to take risks with their own money and create jobs and opportunity. And really, the biggest challenge that we have as part of the federal government is try to find ways to incorporate more of that innovation, not stifle it through overregulation, overtaxation, and those sorts of things.
Talking about a big challenge, part of the foreign aid bill, which also calls for a TikTok ban or sale. How dangerous do you think TikTok is? And if you ask almost any teenager and even some college students, they think, well, my information is not that valuable. I'd rather have TikTok. What do you say to that?
Well, 170 million Americans have used TikTok. But what's unique about TikTok is it's owned by ByteDance, which is a Chinese company. And what people need to understand is that under Chinese law, a Chinese company must share their data, their algorithms, everything with the Chinese Communist Party, which does not exactly have our interests at heart. And so the reason why this bill was so important is I don't believe there will be a ban. I do believe that there will be a divestment so that it will ultimately be sold to other investors who are not members of the Chinese Communist Party. So there are a couple of pieces of this. One is the data that is collected and used that I know many people who use TikTok probably don't think about all the information that they're giving them. There's also your phone, for example. If you have the TikTok app, basically the TikTok owns everything on your phone, from where you are, where you've been, who you're talking to, who you're texting with, everything about you. And then third is the propaganda that's being used, the disinformation. For example, in the conflict in the Middle East between Hamas and Israel, it's amazing to see how many sympathetic posts there are that are pro-Hamas and anti-Israel, for example. These are things that people probably don't think about, but are really important and led to the passage of this bill.
I know you worked hard on this, and what are the realities? Who is big enough to buy out ByteDance and get TikTok?
Well, I read that there are a number of investors that are looking at this. Steve Mnuchin, former Treasury Secretary, former Goldman Sachs guy, who apparently is looking for a number of investors to buy TikTok from ByteDance, and that's just one. I'm sure there are others competing out there. Obviously, it's a very popular and very lucrative business, so I imagine there'll be some stiff competition to purchase it from ByteDance.
We'll be watching that. And as we say goodbye, I wanted to get your take on where do you think we are in the tech world here in Austin, and what does our future look like?
Well, in many ways, I think we're just at the beginning. We're not at the end. That's for sure. One of the things that I've been trying to figure out is how do we get more of the innovative products that our technology experts are producing in the hands of our warfighters to protect our national security. As we've seen, for example, in Ukraine, the use of drones to take out Russian armor. This is a part of how warfare evolves. It's not all the big mainframe platforms, the things like the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter, which are very expensive to make. But now you can basically spend a couple $100 on a relatively cheap drone and basically bypass very expensive air defense systems. So this is part of my particular interest in the technology field because I see the future is limitless, really, for what we can do, and that will, of course, contribute to our national security and keeping the American people safe.
With Futures Command and BAE, the technology that they're evolving and developing is pretty amazing.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, U.S. Senator John Cornyn, for joining us here on Tech This Out, and we'll be watching what happens with the TikTok ban.
Good to be with you.